Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. One of the big dramas of Major 4 in Columbus has returned, with Octane saying that probably Shane should not have sat behind OpTic during the series they played. Still believes though there was no competitive advantage to be had, and Drazah basically says that it's an OpTic excuse and talks about crybaby cheese. We'll dive into it in a couple of seconds here. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. This story as well here from Octane was that at Major 2 in Boston he was planning to propose to his, well now, fiancée Kelsey after they won on stage against FaZe, right? But they lost, so he had to delay it until they won their most recent event. Champs, of course, coming up relatively soon, but Major 5 begins the qualifiers on May the 5th. Also wanted to mention on the Rostermania side, some non-Rostermania from the Seattle Surge. We saw this tweet the other day from Phoenix saying that gotta give my guy Lamar his flowers, and when I saw this tweet gassing up accuracy, I was like, okay, could anything be going on with Mack? However, Phoenix then tweets this out last night and says, just wanted to say I've seen a lot of hate for Mack lately. People need to lay off and leave him alone. Everyone goes through ups and downs, has good or bad days. He always bounces back. As I said before, and I'll say it again, it's always stat-based. He plays the most selfless role out of our team, and I kind of agree that Mack is at times a very impactful player, but look, he made some mistakes at Major 4. There's no doubt about it. I do wonder whether this attitude here, because Los Angeles Thieves, during the Vanguard season, they stuck with their roster, and everyone says, oh yeah, well, they stuck with it, and now they're winning everything, which true, but they made some changes. They put Kenny on the sub, they put Drazah on the flex role, they brought in Shane to help shore up their search and destroy. They did make some moves to take a step in the right direction. I do wonder whether Seattle a little bit are resting on the laurels of that Major 3 victory last year. I think it's still possible that Surge, given the amount of talent they have, could win like either Major 5 or Champs this year, but I don't think it's particularly likely. And when Pred and Sib have the top 2 KDs of Major 4 and they still get top 8, it's just not a particularly good sign. And I just look at a team like Boston. Okay, Boston haven't been great. They came top 12 of the Major, but they're giving it a go. They're making moves. They're trying to bring new people into the team to spice things up, to give them a chance of getting further up the order. Surge just haven't been there. And next year, Surge aren't going to have the talent they have this year. Pred is going to leave, almost guaranteed. Sib is probably going to get an offer from another team as well. So, you know, it's an interesting one for Surge if they decide to stick it out again, because I don't know if this attitude is necessarily the most, you know, with winning in mind to the maximum degree, rather than just wanting to stick with a roster that everyone kind of likes each other. But it might not be particularly successful. Maybe things will change. Of course, they could have maybe tried to go in for Vivid, but then Boston immediately decided Vivid's going back into their team, so they don't really have many options for Mack, I guess, on the market right now. So understandable they're going to stick it out, but just thought that was a pretty interesting one. Also, Doug comments on Snoopy, who is the new player joining the Boston Breach Academy, and Doug even says, Eric is my favourite prospect we've brought into Boston. He's only been competing for 5 months, and he's the type of guy that likes to let his game do the talking. So that is quite the statement from Doug, actually. The favourite prospect he's brought in. He's played with a lot of great players on Boston Academy over the last couple of years. Ghosty, Beans, Kremp recently, that are all now in the league. And to say Snoopy's his favourite one is, you know, definitely high words of praise. Quick note as well from, as Breaking Point noticed, that the Overwatch League started up yesterday only on YouTube. Now, I believe this has been a thing for the Overwatch League for like the entire time, really. But there has been some speculation that a return to YouTube for the CDL will be coming. Thankfully, this season's going to close out at least on Twitch. I'm sure they're going to keep the watch parties being able to be going some form or another. I don't really know what's happening here, but just one thing to note there, because there have been some rumors about that the CDL is going to be back on YouTube next season. I don't want that to be the case, but you know, fundamentally, they might, if they can get some sort of deal from a media rights perspective, that might be what they go for, and the teams might want that as well, because at least it's some revenue for the teams that are struggling to get them as it stands. Let's dive into this all kind of encompassing, really, podcast and interview that Drazah did on the Merc and Maven podcast yesterday. Great interview, so much to discuss in this over the coming days probably, but there's a few interesting things I wanted to dive in on. Firstly, his perspective on his work ethic, right, and how much time Drazah puts into the game, and also on the Shane sitting behind the OpTic guys drama that was going on before. But I thought Drazah's perspective here on, as he says, screw a balance, right, because, you know, there could be a balance between playing the game a lot of the time or actually doing things outside of that. That screenshot keeps flicking up on screen. I'm just going to pause it so that doesn't happen again. And some players, they'll get on and play their scrims, and then after scrims they might watch some VOD, and then they'll probably get off for the rest of the day and, you know, relax a bit, or maybe write a song or whatever they want to do, and that could work for some players. Drazah is not one of those players. He plays COD all the time. He reminds me a bit of Gunless, actually, back in World War II when he first came in. All Gunless would do, he'd wake up, he'd play pubs, then when scrims would happen, he'd play scrims would go off, he'd play 8, and then he'd play pubs again, again until he went to bed and get up and play COD again. Like, that's all Gunless did. And that's when he was at the peak of his powers. Now, you can argue whether that's a good or bad thing to play that much Call of Duty, but that's what Drazah does. He says, screw the balance. I'm going to play way more than everyone else. I'm going to play way more Search and Destroy. He reckons he plays probably 10 times more COD than any other player does outside of scrims. Right? Everyone plays the same amount of scrims, but outside of scrims, he plays way more. 10 times obviously hyperbole, but you get what I mean. Drazah is committed to it. And even last night, I thought was kind of crazy that so the Thieves guys go out to party gear, right? You can see all the Thieves guys and everything, and they bring up this sign that says Drazah's playing 8 right now. So just fantastic stuff, because Drazah turned them down and basically said to Jacob, no, look, I want to actually grind tonight and play more COD because I want to get even better. And Kenny's like, yeah, shout out to you. So Drazah basically said, no, I don't want to drink. This was the tweet here from Mudog, taking the boys out to the club to celebrate the Major 4 win, except Drazah's not good. I'm chalking it tomorrow. I'm not a drinker, I'm a champion. So, just honestly, quality stuff, it's got to be said. And I'll just share those clips in addition to what Octane has to say and Drazah has to say on this.
Shane wanted to watch COD, so he sat behind the team that was closest to where we were sitting. That's it. That's literally it. We were sitting at the bleachers behind the flank, and he didn't want to go across the stage and sit behind FaZe, so he just sat behind OpTic because he wanted to watch COD. That's literally it. And we just wanted to watch live COD because it was there. So him and I watched the Mercado Hardpoint. And when the SnD started, I did say to him, I said, we probably shouldn't hang out and watch this. Watching the SnD is shitty. We shouldn't do this. And then I saw Mercado Hardpoint, knowing that we refused to play the map. So I said, it's okay. It doesn't matter because we're not going to play the map. Apparently Hex didn't like that Shane did that. I mean, in terms of a competitive integrity standpoint, it had zero impact on the tournament. I understand as just a concept in general, watching another team play that you're going to play, sure. But I mean, everyone was doing it. It wasn't just they were just the teams that were left, bro. It could have been London versus Vegas and we would have been sitting there watching. My bad, London and Vegas, but everyone was watching all event because sitting behind the stage is something that you don't get to do at normal events. So you take the opportunity because it's the emotions of the game. You get to hear how the game is going and stuff like that. It's a much different atmosphere than watching on a monitor. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I enjoyed it because it's fun. I mean, I get it. I understand why Hector's upset, but bro, it had zero impact on the series whatsoever.
And how you guys need to adjust that. If you hear them saying, hey, let's do our B strategy, that doesn't change anything because you could just go to Codcaster and see what their B strategy is.
Especially in this time of the year, they ended up playing up Mercado SnD, which we vetoed anyway. So the fact that anyone's saying anything is just another classic OpTic crybaby cheese. But and trying to steal their strats or whatever is just all bullshit. We have probably 20 Mercado SnD VODs of them if we wanted to get them, and we could see the same thing. And the only difference is I'm not going to hear the comm of, I see nothing A, let's go B. It's never going to be anything crazy, and anyone saying anything like that is just trying to, take away from something we did.
It's insane, but I can respect the fact that, it looks bad. I get it. Visually, it doesn't look great.
Yeah,
but
let me someone who doesn't know something, yeah.
So this was a big talking point after the event concluded. Now, let's be honest, right? This is going across all the weekend, as it happens to be with OpTic having to be playing the, things that amplified a little bit more when OpTic are involved in something like this. And Shane was sitting behind the OpTic guys while they were playing a Mercado Search and Destroy. And there was a debate, could that have given them any competitive advantage going into the finals? Obviously, most people say probably not the case. Octane's it didn't make any difference. He can understand why Hex might have seen it as a little bit strange. And fundamentally, because he was sitting with Shane for the hardpoint, and then he decided to get up and leave for the Search and Destroy. Probably not because they felt like there was any competitive advantage to be gained. Because as Drazah says, yes, behind the OpTic guys, you might hear them say, oh, let's do the B strat, let's do the A strat, let's do X, let's do Y, and hear their comms in that sense. But you could probably get all that picture from just watching the VOD anyway. That was Drazah's perspective. And fundamentally, Thieves don't even play that map. So I don't think it made that much difference, if any difference at all. But I feel like Octane realized that it wasn't going to be a good look to see, especially in Search and Destroy, Destroy himself and Shane sitting behind OpTic. So he said to Shane, like, look, maybe you shouldn't do this, and but Shane sat there anyway. Now, as I say, does that imply from Octane that he feels like they were going to gain some advantage, or was he just saying that from a kind of competitive integrity standpoint, or from a viewership standpoint, knowing that it might become a bit of a big deal if it was spotted, especially during Search and Destroy games? Now, Drazah, of course, had his own perspective on the matter and basically said, like, that's just excuses, it's just crybaby cheese. I don't really think any of the OpTic guys actually said anything about this or thought it was a big deal, to be honest. It was often, it was the fans that were saying things, right? And that's probably what Drazah's getting at with the whole crybaby stuff. But, still an interesting story that's going to keep on going. As I've come back to before, I think fundamentally this was a CDL level issue. I don't really think it's on the coaches or the players to deal with this. It's simply the way the venue was set up that this was possible. And in fairness, even earlier in the weekend, players were playing scrims here, but if they were between maps, they'd be turning around, seeing what was going on. And I can't blame the guys sitting there from doing so, because it's a fun opportunity to actually, sit behind and experience teams playing COD on that high level that you don't usually get the chance to do. But probably shouldn't have been allowed, so definitely tweet your thoughts in the comment section below. Drazah was also talking about his Search and Destroy, right? The amount of Search and Destroy he used to play a few years ago and even still today does. And he reckons that basically all he's got to do every tournament is turn up against FaZe, take them down and slam them, and then Octane and Kenny and even Envoy will take care of OpTic because they like to play them. Same thing really where like Dashy and Shotzzy just seem to love to play against FaZe. They just revel in the chance to play those guys. It's the same thing for Drazah against FaZe, and it's certainly the same thing it seems with Kenny and Octane especially, maybe Envoy as well, because he was on OpTic before, but just seems like Kenny and Octane, Kenny especially, just goes different level against OpTic. I don't know how he just plays consistently so well, but you can rely on him to drop crazy numbers in those series. Look at these Search and Destroy stats here for Thieves, a 1.4 for Kenny and Envoy, 1.08 for Octane, and a 1.5 for Drazah, so gonna be tough to beat when a very good respawn team are slaying like that. And obviously these were Drazah's overall stage Search and Destroy numbers at 1.64, so yeah, outrageous stuff, and the grind that Drazah's put in is certainly paying off, and you can't help but, respect that attitude and that Mamba mentality, as people would say. Just to look at some of the other stats of the weekend, I thought this is interesting. This is the season so far, actually. Hill time per 10, Octane is number 1, 89 seconds in Hill. Ghosty is actually number 2, so it does make you wonder, right, when you see the two best hardpoint teams in the game with, okay, Octane's more of the main, Ghosty's more of the flex, but, still, in terms of one of the ARs doing the Hill time role, none of the FaZe guys are on it, for example. And the third best respawn team in the game in hardpoint is probably Surge, actually, in terms of hardpoint win percentage, and accuracy's up here as well, so that probably tells you something. And then Kismet actually is up here, so obviously subliners have a different philosophy in terms of putting the main AR or one of your ARs in the hardpoint, but thought that was interesting to note. There's also this control ticks per round. This was so impressive with Octane, right? The fact that a lot of these other players here, with the exception of Insight, are SMG players, or the dirty work, the objective player, Hicksy, Mack, Kismet, but Octane leads the line on control ticks per round. Like, he's getting in the hill, getting in the control point as well. Really impressive stuff. Control EKIA per round. Envoy's leading that up. It's super marginal, actually, between these top 5, but thought it was pretty interesting. And then Search and Destroy first bloods per round. aBeZy is leading the line by quite a significant margin, really. Then it's Pred, Shotzzy, Drazah, aSeam, actually. So, yeah, expected, I suppose, top 5, but interesting stats nonetheless. And just the final thing to mention here for you guys was, as Nameless points out, the most underrated COD of all time. I'll go first, Infinite Warfare. And I know he was getting roasted for this. Bo says this game was horrible. Dude is bricked in the head, says Nick Merckx. But I actually agree with Nameless on this. I've said this before, that in terms of underrated COD, Infinity Ward definitely, because it was the last jetpack game. People were getting fed up of it at the time. But honestly, looking back on that game, it was a lot of fun to play. The maps were good. Hardpoint was phenomenal in that game in the second half of the year. The guns were really fun to use. It had uplink in the game. Like, I think compared to a lot of other CODs, Infinity Ward was criminally underrated personally. So I actually agree with Nameless on this one, which is a bit of a surprise, to be honest, but very much intrigued to hear your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.